There are two things I don't discuss: politics and religion.
In my house, we don't talk about politics and we don't talk about religion.
I'll talk to you about anything except politics and religion.
I never talk about politics and religion.
Politics determines how we'll live here on Earth. Religion determines how we'll live forever. I'm Irvin Baxter. I think it's time we talk about it. Movie producer Aaron Russo is our guest today on Politics and Religion. More than a movie producer, though, he has become one of the world's foremost crusaders for freedom. Aaron, wonderful to have you back on Politics and Religion.
Hey, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. It really is nice. You guys are doing a great job.
Well, thank you very much. Your documentary, Freedom to Fascism, is absolutely outstanding. What a gift to the world. What a service to the world. What's the response been?
The response has been overwhelming. I've never lived through anything like this before. You know, I've made a lot of hit movies in the past, but it was never quite like this. I've made obviously bigger movies, like Trading Places with Eddie Murphy and the Bette Midler movie, The Rose. But the love I've received from the public on this movie because of the making of this movie has been so outstanding. That I've never seen it before. I often it brings tears to my eyes, just knowing that people are so moved by the movie and how much the movie means to them. That I know the 2 years I took out of my life to make this, it was never about money. Of course, there's no money in documentaries, but it was always about getting the truth out to the public from where we're heading. And the response, I must tell you, it's just like it's unbelievable. I came down with cancer.
Yes.
And I'm really glad I made this movie because the prayers and the devotion that people have shown me since I've made this movie, the love, the outpouring of love to me, has been something I've never seen before in my life, particularly directed at me. And so it's been a very emotional, enlightening, cathartic experience for me to have made this movie and to see how what God has done for me because I made this movie, and it's been unbelievable. I mean, there's been that reaction. There's also been the reaction of just how much people love the movie. Forget me for a second, but just how much they love the movie and how it's waking people up across America from all persuasions of life.
You know, Aaron, I think it's because you dared to tell the truth at considerable personal risk. Because as I watched it, I was spellbound by it, and at the same time, I was filled with this understanding that it took some courage to come right out and just say it, and all of us thank you for that.
Well, again, I thank you so much because to me, it's been very one-sided. I'm the one who's gotten the most benefit out of it because people have just been so kind and so loving to me, and so what night, because I've always had the opinion, not always, there was a time in my life when I truly believed in people, and then a time in my life came where I became a little bit cynical about people and their responses and how I felt people were really just very selfish and always thinking about themselves first and foremost. But this movie, it just changed my vision of how I see things, and I'm sure glad that it did, and because it lets you know that truth and light are the ways that we have to go in our lifetimes. And if you live by truth and light, and you live by God's word, and I believe in God very deeply, it comes back to you. It just comes back to you and when you don't expect it. You're not looking for that,
Well, let's pause just a moment to tell everyone there may be people that don't know about it. The title of the movie is America, Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo. If you haven't seen it, you've got to, period. And you can actually get your own copy and DVD by calling us right here, right now, at 1-800-END-TIME. That's ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. And let me tell you, once you start it, I don't think you can click it off because it's marvelously done. I mean, you would think a documentary might be like boring. No way. Of course, nothing Aaron Russo's a part of is boring. He's just an interesting person. But anyway, I do recommend it. Unqualified, you've got to see it. So I hope you will order your copy right now. 1-800-Endtime is the number.
Aaron, Todd Schwartz said that your DVD makes Fahrenheit 9/11 look like Bambi.
Yes. We've had a lot of that. I mean, Fahrenheit 9/11. I respect Michael Moore as a filmmaker. I don't respect his political philosophy so much, but as a filmmaker, he knows how to make a film. And when I saw Fahrenheit 9/11, I was impressed with the quality of the work that he did. Even though I didn't buy into what he was trying to accomplish, I didn't buy into the story. But I think people realize he comes from very much from the very liberal left side of things, and he attacks the right very strongly in that movie. And it's about liberal, conservative, left versus right, red state versus blue state. And my movie doesn't do that. My movie is really about forgetting both political parties, Democrats and Republicans, and remember that you're an American, and that America comes first, not the political party you're affiliated with. And being an American means you stand up and you believe in the Constitution and what the Founding Fathers gave us as a nation to work with. And it was never, ever about being left or right wing. It was about being an American, freedom of the individual. And unfortunately, in today's world, because the state controls the schools and they control so many things, that people actually believe today that America is supposed to be a democracy. And when I explain to people the truth, which is that, America, the word democracy is not written into the Constitution one time. It's not in the Declaration of Independence one time. It's not in the Bill of Rights one time. The Founding Fathers hated the idea of a democracy because they knew that a democracy is really nothing more than tyranny of the majority. And it's really nothing more than two wolves and a hen voting on who they're going to eat for dinner. And the two wolves are going to vote to eat the hen. And in our republic, which is what we are, the hen would have a gun to protect himself. And in a democracy, what you have is, you have 51% of the people controlling 49% majority rules. And the majority, it's tyranny of the majority. That's not what our Constitution is about. In our Constitution, 99% of the people can't take away the rights of 1%. You have God-given rights. They're your rights because you were born. You're a human being. And your rights are not to be denied by the majority, by the government, by anybody. I can't take your rights away, and the government can't take your rights away.
Aaron, we're against a break here. We'll be back in just a moment. The DVD is called America, Freedom to Fascism, and you've simply got to see it. That's all I can tell you. If you haven't seen it, you owe it to yourself, your family, your business, your church, anybody you love. You've got to see this wonderful documentary by Aaron Russo, our guest today. If you'd like to have your own copy, call us now. 1-800-END-TIME is the number to call. And Aaron Russo is our guest today on politics and religion. Aaron, I'd like to dive in because I know your passion is to tell the truth to people. And this is a story that has to be told over and over again because there's so much disinformation out there that we've got to really take the time to articulate the truth. In your DVD, you talked about the Federal Reserve Bank. You talked about the income tax. You talked about the National ID, the Real ID Act, things that you believe are directly undermining freedom as we have known it in the past. Let me just ask you this way. We've reached a point where the government plans to number all of us, put all of us in a database. How in the world did we get this far from where we started? Whoa,
it's a long lineage there. We got this. Look, the thing is, what would happen is we violated our own Constitution. The Constitution is very clear that only government has the right to create money and that we must use gold and silver as money. In 1913, we gave that right, that power, the most important power of any, to a private bank called the Federal Reserve System. And once the Federal Reserve System was put in a position where they could create money out of thin air, and they started controlling the government. And it's through the control of the government and the senators and the congressmen that this has all happened, because there's an old saying, he who makes the money makes the rules. And the fact is that we live in America today based on a fiat currency, a dollar bill that has no value, it's just a piece of paper. And I'll try to tell you it's based on the gross domestic product and all this other nonsense. It has to be based on something that has intrinsic value. And otherwise, these guys can keep making as much of it as they want. And by making as much as they want, they control everything. They control elections. They control corporations. They decide what candidates are going to get money, which ones aren't going to get money. And over a period of time, they've taken control of the infrastructure of this country. And that's why I call the movie Freedom to Fascism. From being a free country, it's now a fascist country. And by fascism, I'm going back to what Mussolini called fascism, which is big government and big corporations working together to suppress and stifle the people. That's what fascism is. And what we have in this country today is a Republican Party that very much leans in a fascist direction. And we have a Democratic Party that very much leans in a socialist, communistic direction. But the thing is that they're really not very different from each other. They're both collectivism. And once you get involved in collectivism, then you have a situation where the state controls everything. I mean, look what they're doing now. Look at the devious ways that they're doing now with the immigration bill. The immigration bill is really nothing more than a way for them to control the fact that they want to give people ID cards with chips in it. The chip in the ID card will be the telltale sign that they can track you. The next step's going to be that it's going to go into your hand instead of into the credit card. Instead of into a driver's license, the chip's going to go into your hand. And wherever you go, that chip will be with you, and they can track you wherever they go. So how did it happen? It happened because we have a bunch of corrupt Congress people that turned it over to them, and we haven't had statesmen, a real congressmen and real senators to stand up to these guys, to take control. So everybody's out for their own selfish interest, because they all thought that was being this democracy, so to speak. That however these guys vote is what you have to do. In other words, America was founded on the fact that we had democratic principles. When we voted for somebody, that's how they got into office. But once they got into office, they still had to follow the Constitution and the dictates of the Constitution. But once the Federal Reserve took over, there was no more Constitution to follow. Nobody made them follow the Constitution. So they take the attitude now, well, you vote us into office so we could pass whatever laws we want, which is not the case, but we don't do anything about it. That's why I made this movie, to wake people up to the truth, to wake people up so people will know this is how you're getting it, folks, and you better stop it, because we don't have a lot of time left.
Okay, now let's back up for a minute, Aaron, to make sure everyone understands what you're saying. You're saying that our Constitution reserves to the government the printing of money.
The creation of money.
The creation of money. And
money will be gold and silver, defined by silver, basically, yes.
Yes, so, of course, we went off the gold standard in 1971 with Nixon, but before we talk about that, let's go back to the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. And so the power to create money was delegated to the Federal Reserve. Now, most people say Federal Reserve, well, that's part of the government. It's just a branch of government, so what's the problem?
That's not true. It's not a branch of government.
Okay, so that is the problem. The fact is they use the term federal But it's not federal.
It's no more federal than Federal Express. You use the term to mislead people, but it's not federal. It's a private bank. The Federal Reserve is a private bank, and this private bank has the authority to create money for America today. Imagine you and I had the authority to make money for America, and that we're the ones who had that power, and we were evil people. Well, we would own everything. We would own everything. We'd be giving the money to the banks, to the corporations. You know, we'd be the one that decides who got what.
So to compound this travesty, when the government has deficit spending and needs to borrow money instead of producing the money ourselves, we now go to the Fed and borrow it and start paying interest. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. In other words, the government has the authority to print the money, to issue the money. But instead of issuing the money, they gave that authority to the Federal Reserve. So when the government needs money, it sells bonds to the Federal Reserve and to other places. And by selling the bonds, the bank buys them, and then the bank puts a deposit into the federal government's bank accounts. And then we have to pay, the government has to then pay interest on the money they just borrowed from the Federal Reserve. Right? Now, why would the government have to borrow any money at all if they can make the money? Think about that question. Not one politician I've ever asked this question of can answer the question. Why does the government borrow money when they can create it? If you had the right to create money, think about this. For everybody at home listening, think about this. If you had the legal authority to create money in your basement, would you borrow it and then have to pay interest on it, or would you just create it yourself?
No, I just fire up the printing press and let it roll.
Exactly, and that's what they do. But the government doesn't do that. The government borrows the money from them,
and then we pay interest to the stockholders of the Federal Reserve. So somebody's getting rich.
Exactly. Through our income taxes, we pay the interest.
Now, we didn't have an income tax, though, when the Federal Reserve was established in 1913.
Right, because there's no interest to pay. There was never any income tax in America. Well, during the Civil War, there was income tax for a little while to finance the war. But there's really never a time when we had income tax in America. But you have to pay the banks back somehow. You know, there's an old saying, well, you don't have to worry about the deficits because we borrow the money from ourselves. That's not true. We borrow it from a bank. And we do have to pay interest on it. And that's the thing. And so they charge you all this interest, and what I call the three evil eyes: interest, inflation, and income taxes. The three eyes, they keep people on, it's like a hamster on a wheel. They just keep you going all the time, spinning round and round and round until you're so exhausted, one day you die. And they sucked all your energy. You see, and that's what it is. They just want to keep you alive so they can live off your labor. You're like a mule.
So the income tax was against the Constitution originally.
Well, the income tax, no, the government, this is where it gets confusing for certain people. The income tax is the government can impose a tax on anything they want, basically, but it has to have certain requirements first. So to have like the Constitution says, you can have a tax, an excise tax. You know, where you charge people, it's like a sales tax, like on gasoline. It's perfectly legal for the government to have a tax on gasoline. Okay?
Uh-huh.
Okay, because it would have to be divided equally amongst all the states, and every state would have to have the same tax, the same federal tax on the gasoline. All right? And so that's legal, and you can do that. And we do have federal taxes on gasoline, which runs the same in every state. Now, each state has a different state tax on gasoline. In terms of the federal tax, it's the same everywhere in the country, in every state. If you want to impose an income tax, it has to be done by census and apportioned, which means that you can have a tax on somebody's income, but it has to be apportioned by population, collected by the state, and sent into the government. And it's a one-time thing. So in other words, let's say There's 300 million people living in America today.
Aaron, we're going to run out of time in this segment. We're up against another break, so just hold that thought. But we're talking about an income tax, most of which is required to now pay the interest on the federal debt. It's like we're on a vicious cycle here. Anyway, Aaron Russo is our guest, and the DVD is America, Freedom to Fascism.
Irvin is headed northwest in just a day or so this Thursday in Moses Lake, Washington, 7:30 in the evening at the Best Western Lake Inn and Conference Center in Moses Lake, and then Friday in Spokane at the Mirabeau Park Hotel, also 7:30. If you want further details, you can call us here at 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-Endtime, or go to endtime.com, click on Prophecy Conferences there. You'll see all the details. So those of you in Washington State, prepare yourselves. It's going to be a great time with Irvin.
And by the way, those will be two different stations, two different messages. And so if you want to come to both, I think they're close enough together that some of you could do that. We will be dealing with two different topics. Aaron Russo's video, America, Freedom to Fascism. It's absolutely a must-see. If I had the power, if I were king for a day, I would decree that every person in the world look at this DVD. That's how important I think it is. And our guest today is Mr. Aaron Russo, and we appreciate so much him taking his time to be with us on politics and religion. Aaron, there's a lot. We've got an awful lot to talk about yet today. I want to get to some things that I think will pop some people's eyes open here, because we have three big threats to our freedoms right now. We've got the Federal Reserve. We've got the graduated income tax. By the way, both of those things, central banking and a graduated income tax, were both in the Communist Manifesto as two necessary things to move a nation toward a communist state. Are we communists right now, Aaron?
Are we communists?
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. If it depends how you're going to make that decision. If it's based on the definition of what is communism and the definition in the Communist Manifesto, we are. We're living very much out of the 10 leading points in the Communist Manifesto. We in America live under 7 of them. And so you can pretty much say if we're not there yet, we're sure close enough. And being forced to take these ID cards, and it's called, whether you want to call it communism or fascism. Communism is a little bit more like socialism. Fascism is a little bit more, big corporations and big government working together. And so it's some sort of hybrid between the two of them. It's a cartel of banks that have turned this country into a collectivist society. And they keep telling us that we're capitalists, but what's amazing to me, ever watch CNBC on television, the business channel? They talk all the time about how we're the most capitalistic nation in the world. Well, think about it. How can you have a central bank that makes all the decisions on money, and then say you're a capitalist bank? It's a central planning bank. That's what communism is. It's this illusion they put over people's eyes. We're not capitalists here in America. You wouldn't have a central bank if you were capitalist.
You mentioned the immigration bill.
Yeah.
And that's huge right now in the news. I noticed there's a job verification section.
Oh, yes. You're hitting on it exactly right.
To the bill that you've got to be in their database or it's going to be illegal for you to be hired.
You can't work.
You cannot work. Now, if you can't work, you can't make money, and that means you can't buy or sell. Now, we know there's a prophecy in the Bible that talks about in the end time, a time when every person will have to have a mark or a number, or they will not be able to buy or sell. And, this is one of the scariest pieces of legislation in the history of America.
I think so. It's no different than what the Nazis did.
Yeah,
Jews, when they had them have the serial numbers on their arms.
Yeah, it's.
But this is worse.
Yeah, well, you have to have it on a card in your hand, but there's no difference between having it in your hand or on your hand.
The difference is that it's going to be inside your hand. In other words, if it's on a card, you can always find ways of getting around it from the card. But if it's planted inside your body, then it's with you at all times.
Now, I want to get to that in a minute, but
Sure.
but let's talk before we go there, because that's a stunning piece of information that you have that I want you to tell everybody about. But in the course of your life, one of the most famous American families is the Rockefeller family.
Yes.
And you told on an interview I heard you do about becoming a friend with Nick Rockefeller. Tell us how that happened and what exactly came down there.
Oh, okay. Nick Rockefeller, I was running for governor in Nevada. In 1998 was the election. And I guess I made a video in 1996. And I guess Nick Rockefeller saw the video and called this attorney, a woman, and she called me and asked me if I wanted to meet one of the Rockefellers and have dinner with him. And I said, sure, I'd love to. Because obviously I knew all about the Rockefellers, and it was definitely somebody that I thought was worth meeting and worth knowing. And we went to dinner that night, and I met a very, very intelligent man I guess he was in his early 40s then, and very intelligent, very bright guy. And we went to dinner. We had a very nice time, and he was talking to me about the movie. And over the next number of years, we got fairly close. And for me, it was almost like the only way I can compare it is it was like two brothers in the Civil War. You know, like say from Virginia, but one was on the side of the North, one was on the side of the South, and yet through the war, they still cared about each other. Anyway, I met Nick, and I liked him. He made me laugh. He was very smart, one of the smarter people I had ever met, and he was a wealth of knowledge. And I think I had a lot of knowledge that he wanted to hear about from my point of view, how I see things. Which was very opposite of the way he saw things, and we shared a lot of that, and he pursued that relationship as I did, and we got to there's nobody here to pick that up. We got to become good friends, and over time we talked a lot, and in the talking, he revealed quite a lot of information to me that I was surprised he did. And in retrospect, I understand why he did it. And the thing is that what he did was to gain my confidence. And in the end, I realized he was never really my friend, and that the relationship was one of me, recruiting me into their own organization, like the Council on Foreign Relations. You know, they wanted to recruit me in there. And
did they actually invite you to be a member of that, Aaron?
Well, the way it works is first they talk to you about it, and then if they decide to invite you, they send you a formal letter. I never got the letter because I always said I'm not interested. You know, but I think if I would have said I was interested, I think they would have, yeah.
Uh-huh.
But I never actually got the letter inviting me in. But I very much felt like that was at the point of it all, and so but I just couldn't go. It's just not. Can I get rid of this call coming in?
Sure. We're talking to Aaron Russo today while he's taking care of that other phone that's ringing in his ear. Let me remind you that he is the producer of America, Freedom to Fascism, a wonderful documentary that talks about the Federal Reserve. If you don't understand the Federal Reserve, this is in real plain English so that you're able to get your teeth into it and you can understand what's really going on. He also talks about the voluntary income tax. You didn't know it was voluntary, did you? But actually, that's what the 16th Amendment says, I understand, or at least it's somewhere in our government that it is a voluntary income tax. So the DVD tells you all about it, and I think Aaron's back with us now. But if you haven't ordered the DVD yet, please do it. The number to call is 1-800-Endtime. Okay, pick it up there, Aaron.
Anyway, I hear you talking about the 16th Amendment. I never got a chance to finish it in the last break while we were talking about it. Anyway, the 16th Amendment, just very quickly. The 16th Amendment, they try to pass that because there was nothing in the Constitution that allowed them to do that, because you had to do it by census, and so that they try to use the 16th Amendment to get around the Constitution, right? Add that in, but the fact is that the Supreme Court ruled on 8 different occasions that the 16th Amendment did not give the government that power to impose an income tax. So whoever gives you that 16th Amendment argument is lying, or they don't know what they're talking about, because the Supreme Court shut that down many times. And it's in the movie when Sheldon Cohen, the ex-commissioner, tries to say the 16th Amendment, and he points out that that the Supreme Court said the 16th Amendment didn't give him that power, and that's when he got all flustered. It's all in the film, by the way. But in any case, back to where we were, about Nick Rockefeller.
Okay.
So, in any case, we became, and he used to reveal to me things they did and how they worked, through the back door to get things done.
We're coming upon a break, Aaron, so it sounds like you're coming upon the punchline of your conversation with Nick Rockefeller, the good stuff, and save that for this next segment. You are listening to our conversation with our good friend and special guest, Aaron Russo, award-winning filmmaker. 1-800-END-TIME if you'd like his DVD. We'll be right back.
I can't believe it, but it is the last segment with our guest, Aaron Russo. So, Aaron, we're going to have to really move here to get all this in.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wow.
No problem whatsoever. We're enjoying every minute of it. But we're talking about Rockefeller now and the friendship you made and the overtures toward the possibility of being a member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Right.
Tell us what else happened.
Well, a good example. I mean, he talked to me about the ID cards and the chips, and we talked about many things. And one of the best lessons I learned was he brought up to me one night, and this is a lesson how they operate, so you understand. He brought up to me one night, he said, he was at my apartment, and he brought up, what do you think about women's lib? And I said, women's lib? I said, I think that I had fairly conventional thinking at the time. And I said, I guess it's about, women having the right to vote like a man does, and having the right to work, and, equality between men and women. And he said to me, he started to laugh. He says, "You're an idiot." I said, "Why am I an idiot?" And he was being nice. He wasn't being mean when he said that. He said, "You want me to tell you what women's lib was about?" I said, "Yeah, I do. I'd like to know." He says, there were 2 reasons women's lib came into being. And we, the Rockefeller family, supported women's lib. We were really big financial backers of women's lib, and we were very much involved in that becoming reality. And he said, "You want to know why?" I said, "Yeah, what are the 2 reasons?" He said, "Well, the first reason is that we couldn't tax half the population before women's lib. Half the population, we couldn't tax them. They weren't slaves. And the second reason is, with women's lib, we now get children born at the public schools at a much earlier age, and we get them into the state schools. And the children begin to think of the schools as their parents, and not the parents. They look to the schools for guidance to grow up. And we take control of the children's minds at an earlier age. And that's why we supported women's lib."
So by the women going to work, now then they're paying taxes, up the tax base hugely. Exactly. And then also the children are in state government schools. Right. Gotcha.
And so we get control of the children's minds at an early age. It's always the thing. You always want to get control of the children, right?
Yes.
Now they get control of the children. They tell the children how great it is to have an ID card and how great it is to have this and have that. And that's what they've done over the years. They've indoctrinated kids growing up to think, oh, this is okay, that this is all part of freedom. They've convinced everybody that America is still a free country, that we're a capitalistic nation. And it's not true. We know it's not true. But when you get kids at an early age, it's very hard to turn their minds around. And they're not taught the morality that parents will usually teach their children.
Aaron, didn't he also talk to you about some foreign policy type stuff?
We discussed many things, sure. You talking about the war, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just trying to give you that last example was more an example of how they function, how they think. He also made it very clear to me that 11 months before 9/11 ever happened, he told me, Aaron, there's going to be an event. And out of this event, we're going to invade Afghanistan, we're going to invade Iraq, and we're going to go after Chavez in Venezuela. And out of this event, what we're going to do is we're going to take over the oil fields of Iraq. We're going to create huge military bases in Iraq. And we're going to get the New World Order plans in the Middle East. It's our way of getting involved in the Middle East. We'll have Israel, Saudi Arabia, Iraq. We'll control the oil, and it's all going to be done to promote the New World Order and control the oil fields.
You know, Aaron, when I never forget, just before we invaded Afghanistan, we were negotiating with the government of Afghanistan because we wanted to put a pipeline through there,
exactly,
I think to the Caspian Sea, and they turned us down.
That's right, and what do you call it was was from Conoco Oil. The guy they put in charge was from Conoco Oil. That's correct. What you're saying is correct. They turned us down. That's why we went in there. We took over. He also told me that we're going to be going into caves in these foreign countries looking for Muslims, and we're never going to find them. And he was laughing at it. Oh, we're going to go into caves. We're going to look for people. He made it sound and just the whole thing was just a giant scam. There really was no war on terror.
Now, before we run out of time, I've got to ask you one more thing.
Sure.
In the interview I heard you do, you stated that he told you that the goal was to ultimately put a chip under the skin of every human being. Did he tell you that?
Yes, he did.
Whoa.
The ultimate goal is to put a chip in everybody's hand. Exactly. And I said, well, why would I want a chip in my hand for, Nick? What makes you think I would want that? So he says, well, your chip will say KMA on it. And
that gives you exemption from, if you're stopped, they'll know you're an untouchable.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It's the code.
Well, the reason I wanted to bring that up is because, in the prophecy of the Bible about the mark of the beast, the words that were translated 666 are chi stigma. And the word stigma means to stick or prick with a mark denoting ownership. So if you inject, using a needle, a computer chip under the skin, it's almost like it's the exact fulfillment. And when I heard you say that on that interview, I thought, this is absolutely incredible. Now, I'd like to remind all of our listeners out there, the Rockefellers are, David Rockefeller was the president of the Council on Foreign Relations, and 50% of all cabinet members in the last 50 years have come from that private club, and he was the founder of the Trilateral Commission, which has produced many of our presidents. So we're talking about pinnacles of power here, and here Nick Rockefeller is telling our friend Aaron Russo that the plan is to put a computer chip under the skin. That's almost breathtaking, Aaron.
Well, that's why the Bible amazes me so much, that this is in the prophecy from so many years ago, because I got it firsthand right out of his mouth, and that's definitely the fact. And it's so interesting. I'm not sure all the connections yet, but recently the Chinese bought a percentage of this company called Blackstone, right? Blackstone holding company in America for $3 billion. And that Blackstone was the holding company that owned Building 7 at the World Trade Center. And now China's come in and buy the company that was the owner of the building, or buy a percentage of it, rather. And then where did all the steel get shipped to from 9/11? It all got shipped to China. Right? So I'm wondering what that connection is all about.
The plot thickens. As much as I hate to say this, we have run out of time.
I can't believe it went by so quickly.
And but what a great conversation, Aaron. And by the way, We know you're battling cancer. Our prayers are with you. I'm asking all of our people out there to put you on their prayer list.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate that, everybody.
Okay, well,
all the prayers I get, I need them.
Okay, well, we're certainly doing that, and we thank you so much. We care about you. We love you, and thank you for your wonderful work. And we're going to have to say goodbye to you right now, but we certainly hope to do it again one of these days. The DVD is called America, Freedom to Fascism by Mr. Aaron Russo, and it will give you the truth about the Federal Reserve, about the income tax. Now, Aaron does not recommend you don't pay your income tax, even though he points out that it's been proven many times that the way it was enacted was illegal. At the same time, he does not recommend that you don't pay your tax because we don't want you calling us from a jail cell. However, he does recommend that all of us work together to overthrow the Federal Reserve, to get rid of these tyrannical things here in the United States of America so that freedom can once again be restored. So one more time, give us a call. The number to call is 1-800-END-TIME.